Students, welcome to the presentation dealing with school counselors. I want to introduce you to Dr. Mary Waters Bilbo. Dr. Waters Bilbo is on faculty here at NSU in the Psychology and Counseling Department. So all of you have read the article dealing with how school counselors make a world of difference. And so I thought that Dr. Waters Bilbo could shed some light on that. And so if you'd like to just give us just a quick background.
Sure. So I've been a school counselor for 15 years, and then also was a coordinator of the elementary school counselors at Tulsa Public Schools. So I have lots of experience in the trenches, as well as having written my dissertation in school counseling, so I'm familiar with the research as well. And so when I ask people, what is it that school counselors do, even for my own students, they talk around the issue. The job of a school counselor is to develop a program. And the program should hit the domains that you read about. So the domains are career development among students, academic and social development, and academic achievement. Those are our domains. And they do bleed into each other. So often kids might be referred to the school counselor for having anger issues or perhaps having issues with study skills, and we would put those in the social emotional domain. And we know that when we teach SEL, social emotional development, when we teach SEL intentionally, it impacts academic achievement. In fact, if you look at the CASEL website, CASEL, CASEL.org, the website, you'll see two meta-analyses there that were done that looked at schools that were implementing SEL really well, and it did have about an 11-point difference in academic achievement.
Oh, wow.
So it's huge, right? So I know all you administrators out there, you want high test scores, right? Well, one way that you can get higher test scores is by having more fully implemented SEL programs. That same CASEL website will also give you the evidence-based programs guides at the elementary, middle, and high school level. And of course, there are a lot more programs at the elementary, middle school level than they are at the high school level. But again, the research tells us that actually the delivering of school counseling curriculum is more effective when it's at the middle and high school levels.
Oh, and that's interesting because as a former middle school principal, to be honest, I really didn't know the job of the school counselor.
Thank you for the admission.
That's being honest. I was lucky for most of my principalship to have an excellent school counselor. He retired at about 43 years of experience in this. So he knew what he was doing and he could talk to people. And he probably hit on that social emotional learning domain a lot more than I realized, simply because of the nature of who he was. I think that principals, at least in my perception, I probably had the misperception that the majority of their work was just guidance in the sense of helping students fill out a FAFSA form to go to college or something like that. But you're telling us their role is much more in depth than that.
Right, so a program is not just curriculum either. So school counselor has a curriculum, but then a school counselor is also highly trained in what we call responsive services, which is responding to crisis. And our students graduate with 60 credits, a 60-credit master's degree. The state only requires 32. So when I talk to administrators, I like to kind of rub it in and say, your school counselors probably have more education than you have.
This is very true.
Yeah. So our school counselors are highly trained, and so really you can feel comfortable with the school counselor being able to handle those crises that come up. I always felt that my relationship with my principal got really close when unfortunately we had something tragic happen, because that's more in our training than it might be in administrators' training.
And I will say it definitely is. We really don't deal with that aspect at all in training administrators. So one of the things that the article talks about is assessing your program. So in this, in our course, this is a fundamentals of principal school administration course. So this is kind of a just touch your toe in all the different waters of what a principal does. But one of the things that I stress as we go through here is the idea of continuous improvement and, what are your goals for this piece of thing that you're doing and what are your goals for here. And so when we talk about the school counselor program and the article address the template and being able to use data and stuff to assess the effectiveness, can you speak to that any?
Sure. So actually, if you're an administrator hired in a district that has adopted the Tulsa model for your evaluation, one piece of the counselor evaluation talks about an OSCR, the Oklahoma School Counselor Accountability Report. And that is a pretty quick and easy way for a school counselor to evaluate his or her program.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks at the 3 domains: achievement, academic achievement, career development, and social emotional skills. And it asks the school counselor to show data that indicates that they have impacted those domains.
Oh, mm-hmm.
And then, we're really just looking for a graph. And so, for example, with the ICAP rolling out, the individual career academic programs that all kids are going to have starting in 9th grade next year. So a good, perhaps a good project there would be, I administered a career inventory and the students can all name 5 careers that they didn't know about prior to my implementation. And that might be a good way to assess what we've done in the career domain.
Oh, that's good, because I also preach to them data. Let the data tell us what's happening.
And then school counselors should be working on things like suspensions and office referrals. So your school counselor is probably the most trained person in your building to be able to work with the kids with behavior issues to reduce those office referrals and suspensions. Now, the school counselor is not you. They shouldn't be meting out discipline, okay? That's not our role, and we're lousy at that. But we're really good at working with kids who have behavior problems, and we're good at helping teachers come up with interventions so we can keep kids in school and not be suspended.
And that's probably, again, just to be transparent, when I was a principal, that was probably one of the least utilized places where I used my school counselor. So just to kind of wrap up a little bit here, going to the last part of the article, it talked about some barriers to effective counseling. One of them, of course, was caseload.
Yeah. So the ASCA model, the American School Counselor Association says that we should have 250 kids to every school counselor. And I think the ratio in Oklahoma is not as bad as in some other states. But
it's good to know.
But it's not great. I mean, it's about 450 to 1.
And that was about what we had. I did enjoy the story about Colorado in there, where Colorado invested in 80 counselors, I think, throughout the state. And anyway, ultimately what they showed is that the students were attending school enough after these additional counselors came in that when the grant ran out, the funding generated from their attendance, and we take school finance, so they understand all that, paid for the counselors after the grant ran out. So that was very interesting. But they also talked about the fact that those ratio numbers were in the low 200s to 1.
Right. So we shouldn't be doing therapy in the school, but having even a 250 to 1, which is ideal. If we're having therapy with 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 students, we're not providing the services to all students. So we're not therapists in the school. That's another type of personnel that you might have in your schools. We're there to administer a program. And we're there maybe short-term therapy, and it might be 10-minute brief solution focus, get back to class, let's try some of this. That's what you should be seeing your school counselors do. If you're seeing your school counselor having 40, 50-minute sessions with students, That's not appropriate.
Yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah.
So one of the other things it mentioned in the article was doing administrative duties. And you kind of hit on that a while ago, and I did not have an assistant principal, so I will say that when I was out of the building, I would tap my school counselor as being the administrator in charge. I don't know what the answer to that is, other than we've also talked with librarians for this project, and I think part of it is respecting the role of the school counselor, and just because you might be in your office and don't have students doesn't mean that that's free time.
Right. So, I mean, to be the teacher in charge actually makes a little sense if you don't have an assistant principal. That's not the worst use of a school counselor, as long as it's not, 40 days that you're out of the building.
Right.
You wouldn't have a job if you're out of the building 40 days. It does get hard if the principal's out a lot, to be that person in charge. But that's not, so school counselors should do fair share duties. I mean, I maybe cafeteria duty 2 times a week, or bus duty, every day. I didn't mind having bus duty. I liked saying goodbye to the children.
Right.
I mean, so I think the ideal thing is we have something in the ASCA model called a counselor principal agreement. And it actually, what it is it's a vehicle for the principal and the school counselor to have a conversation about these issues. We all know that we have to have a role in helping the school run well. But it's just when we get piled on with those administrative duties to the extent that we can't do our job.
Right, carry out your mission as a counselor. So the last thing that we cannot just leave it with going unsaid is the role of the school counselor is not the test coordinator.
No, it really isn't. I know that I was a school counselor during the height of the testing madness, so I hear that it's gotten a little better. But the 1 year at the high school level where I had to administer the test, I really did nothing with my students from about February till about May. And I mean, of course I did talk to my students during the day, but I would leave the building every night at 11 o'clock at night for about 2 months. And that's just not fair to do to somebody.
Exactly. If you really think about it, that's that time period, especially those seniors, need you the most, because you are that person who's going to help them complete their FAFSA, really look into college and do all those finalizations needed to get into college in the fall. And unfortunately, your counselors are probably taken out of that role more often than not, especially in rural schools. Many of our candidates work in rural schools where the counselor and the principal are the only ones, and it usually goes to the counselor to do that. So
again, I mean, I think a counselor has a role in it, but when I worked in New Jersey, I had a secretary. Okay, we fund schools differently in New Jersey, so I bring that up a little bit reluctantly. But I mean, she actually could do most of the grunt work, and I signed off on things. So I think if you put your head together, again, I don't think counselors mind having a role in that. It's just when that person, the counselor, has the whole responsibility, soup to nuts.
Gotcha. Yeah.
It's just unfair. The second year I was at the high school level, I didn't have to do testing because one of my students got the Gates Millennials Scholarship, and my principal said, if you can do that with students, you're far more valuable to me working with students than you are. And it wasn't just me that got that, but that's an intense process working with kids with essays and everything. So your school counselors bring so much training and so many skills to the job. I just don't understand why we can't hire clerks to do testing and have an administrator sign off on it.
Yeah.
It's just not that complicated a skill set that you need. And frankly, a lot of school counselors don't have that skill set, being super organized and everything else.
Right. I understand. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk with us and give us probably just a refresher of the role of the school counselor.
Well, it's been my pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Thank you for the opportunity.